GearNetwork.com.
The following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network.
From wherever we decide studios, broadcasted live on iTunes, Spreaker, and worldwide, this is the Turnbuckle Talk Radio Podcast with your host, the producer, Pat G. The G stands for gangsta. And now kick back and get ready for the eargasms.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to another edition of the TTRP Turnbuckle Talk Radio Podcast. Pat G, Dan Fury, back at you again. But this episode is going to be a little bit different than all the rest. This is going to be a primarily show done on the 25th anniversary of The Rock and The Rock's career. Of course, we did cover it for about 5-10 minutes when we did our Survivor Series recap, but we felt that the man deserved a show dedicated to him and his career. And of course, we are going to have a special guest, a man that was inspired to get into pro wrestling, Cyclone Jones.
He will be in the building, Pat G. The G
I will say the over under on Cyclone putting himself over will be 15.3 seconds.
Okay, I'm going to go with this. The moment that Cyclone Jones joins us on this podcast, I give him 2.5 seconds before he does something like this. But y'all need to just simmer down because Cyclone Jones is in the building. And then, of course, from that point forward, the episode goes downhill. But as Pat G said, Cyclone ain't even here. He's going to be like, man, I challenge you. All right. This is the 25th anniversary of the most electrifying man in all of entertainment. The one and only future president of the United States, Dwayne Johnson, a.k.a. The Rock, the people's champ. You know, the King Brahma, whatever nickname you want to give him. You know, he is arguably, actually, I would even say not arguably, the greatest professional wrestler to transcend all of pop culture and really, you know, the world. You show the Brahma Bull emblem to people, and it's, I've said it myself while training people at the gym. If you walk into the gym with two symbols on, you better be ready to work. One of them is the Superman symbol, and one of them is the Brahma Bull. And
absolutely. I completely agree with that. The interesting thing is the Rock, Dwayne Johnson, of course, a could be considered a third generation superstar, and honestly, he was the first third generation superstar to make that leap into professional wrestling after, of course, the trials and tribulations that he had trying to follow a professional football career, his time at the University of Miami, his time in the CFL. It didn't pan out the way that he thought it would have. So, of course, his dad being Rocky Johnson, his grandfather being the High Chief Peter Maivia, him coming from that lineage of wrestling, not only from Rocky Johnson, but the Samoan side of it with that, it's just like it was a match made in heaven for his career to start. And of course, he paid tribute to his grandfather when he debuted November the 17th in 1996 at Madison Square Garden at the Survivor Series as Rocky Maivia. So it was paying homage to his dad and his grandfather with his name. Although the ring gear, the bright blue tassels and the checkerboard neck thing, man, It was a little rough.
The funny part about it is if you listen to interviews talking from the man himself, he wanted to make it in pro wrestling on his own name, but Vince McMahon, being the master salesman he was, said, "Hey, you're the first. Like this has never happened. You're the first third generation superstar in the WWF at the time." And at that point, I'm looking at it from this weird perspective of a fan then and a fan now. People knew Soul Man Rocky Johnson. The older fans knew Soul Man Rocky Johnson. The older fans, like my mother and father, knew High Chief Peter Maivia. Your younger fans like me didn't really know who they were. So this guy coming in on the lineage of past superstars, it didn't matter to me necessarily. It mattered to some of them. And in fact, that came into play at WrestleMania 13 that year with Soul Man Rocky Johnson with the assist on his son's behalf. But really, I was interested in this guy. And when he was presented to the wrestling fans via vignettes and interviews with JR Jim Ross, I was not necessarily sold on him because, truth be told, at least on this half of the podcast, I know in a few minutes I'm going to be outmanned 2-1. I could have given two cares less about his academic football career. I could have cared less about his career as a star in the Canadian Football League for the Calgary Stampeders. I wanted to know, can this guy wrestle?
Yeah.
Is this guy a good athlete? They sold him on, this is Blue Chipper right here. This is going to be the man. Meanwhile, in my mind, we already had the man in Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bret Hart, the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels, and The Undertaker. I had my guys in WWF already kind of solidified.
Yeah, like when The Rock debuted, it was one of those things of, okay, like you said, if you're like the older generations knew who Soul Man Rocky Johnson were, they knew who High Chief Peter Maivia was. They knew those wrestlers, similar to even in today's aspect, like even in today's aspect, when you had your Bray Wyatts and your Randy Ortons show up, like your older generations knew who Cowboy Bob Orton was. They knew who Mike Rotunda was, also known as IRS. Like
even in AEW, you have the Gun Club.
Yep.
Us Attitude Era fans know who Billy Gunn is. It's no secret. But a 10-year-old or might not know who the hell this guy is. So him being in there with his sons might not matter as much to them as who are these two kids that are breaking out in professional wrestling, which is kind of the way that The Rock's career started in a certain way.
Absolutely. And on top of that, you got to look at The Rock. The Rock was kind of the fire starter to a lot of these third generation superstars coming into the WWE and professional wrestling itself, because you had the likes of Natalia, you had the likes of Joe Henning, you had the likes of Bo Dallas, you had the likes of Ted DiBiase Jr., of course, Chavo Guerrero Jr., Tessa Blanchard. You had multiple people that the older generation, like our parents, would know who, and some of the people we knew who they are. We knew who Tully Blanchard were. We knew who Mr. Perfect was. Like there were people that we knew just because we were born in the 80s, so we caught the back end of their careers or whatever, so we knew who they were. But then it opened up more eyes, because when the WWE debuted the network, it allowed you to go back and watch that history and everything, and see that history of how these generations paved the way for the stars of today. And The Rock being the third generation star, being being the first one that led to influx of all these more third generation talents.
And this is something that came up in conversation last night with my parents. My mom was talking to me about The Rock, the Young Rock television show on NBC. It started production, and they are going to concentrate this season on The Rock's, or Rocky Maivia, first year in the WWF, that November to November timeframe.
Yeah.
And what a lot of people look at today, much in the same way of John Cena fans, and certainly there are other superstars that kind of follow that same suit. His first year in the WWF was not well received by fans. You have to take into context, the wrestling fans that are listening to this that are in our age group and older might know, but to a younger listener who sees The Rock as this globally respected actor, star, wrestler, entrepreneur, future president, he was not liked by the fans. The fact was, he was kind of shoved down our throats as a traditional 80s white meat baby face, always smiling, even in loss, I would go so far as to say plucky. In the same plucky, in the same
just
way
as we're about to talk to it, our guest is joining.
Let's do the countdown. Ready? When he comes in, I'm going to start.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in our special guest for this rock-themed episode, the man making his return to the TTRP, Cyclone Jones.
Ladies and gentlemen, you know me, I know that we know each other. Cyclone Jones in the building, baby.
2 seconds. It took him 2 seconds.
Hey,
That's all it took.
Yep, you were totally right. You said it was going to take him 2 seconds.
Listen, how can I speak without introducing myself? I have to let people know who I am.
We felt the aura of Cyclone Jones from the moment we pressed record. Like the feel of and much like the ladies know, like the feel of the Cyclone was deep inside of us, and we were ready because a couple weeks back. First off, Muffa, I miss you. I love you. It is great to see you, even via Zoom. Just so we're clear, I know you're giving the love. Goddamn, Cyclone, it's good to see you. A couple weeks back, we recorded the Survivor Series wrap-up where we talked about the 25th anniversary of The Rock, and it almost felt like we shouldn't be having this conversation without you, because as a professional wrestler yourself, your main inspiration, the guy that you have talked about over and over for years on this podcast, being your inspiration, your muse, your person that ushered you into wanting to follow this, has been your future president, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, has it not?
Yes. It's funny because, I've watched wrestling for so long, with Steve Cruz actually now putting out a Facebook post about how old I am, about being the first ones in Christmas. Anyway, but I've always watched wrestling, and I've always been into wrestling. But the person that actually made me want to actually become a pro wrestler was The Rock. And that's my story never changes. I was in Atlanta, Georgia. I walked into a restaurant. They had wrestling on, and I saw The Rock standing on the turnbuckle, and he's feeling the electricity. And I literally stood there and watched this show as my family went to the table. 5-10 minutes passed, and I'm sitting there watching. I didn't even know they left yet. And from there on in, I was like, yo, I'm going to be a wrestler. Like, I'm doing it. But The Rock, he commands the attention of everybody that he speaks to when he's in the room. And that's something that I love to do. I love to be the center of attention, even though, it's fun and I do it in fun, but I love it,
Which is ironic because Pat G and I were just getting into The Rock's first year, and The Rock has admitted himself, and actually the fans have been quite vocal, that The Rock's first year could not have gone any worse. I mean, if you want to talk about worst rookie years, you'd have to compare him to John Cena as far as bad rookie years. But The Rock really laid the foundation for this is how you have so much hype around you and how it fails because the fans don't feel what you're putting out.
Right. Yeah.
And during that whole first year, you also got to remember he debuted November of 97. So it was kind of in that midst of the true Monday Night War, because you had the Attitude Era, you had DX, you had the NWO, and here you go with Rocky Maivia showing up, being portrayed as the young blue chipper, the first third generation superstar, and he's going to be the next big thing type deal. And as you said, that true blue 80s type white face baby face good guy, that the crowd was just like, no, we've seen this. We don't care for this anymore. Like, we want the realism. And it wasn't until like the crowd was doing the die Rocky die chants and where his metamorphosis happened into The Rock.
Well, you know what? With the metamorphosis, as you say, it's something where, because he was Dwayne Johnson, because of who his dad, his grandfather, and his grandmother was, when he started doing, of course, he did the Flex Cabana, and horrible, and then he came back as Rocky Maivia, his father and his grandfather's name, which a lot of people don't know. But when he came out as that, and people were doing the Die Rocky Die, he went back to the higher ups and said, "Yo, let me run with this. They want me to die. Let me tell. Okay, you want me to die? Whatever. Now I'm gonna show you why. I'm gonna give you the reasons why you want me to die, because now I'm gonna turn completely heel." And that's when he took over the Nation of Domination. That's when he started doing the eyebrow and everything like that. So he completely did what a lot of wrestlers should do, and not force. He did what WWE finally did with Roman Reigns. Everybody hated Roman Reigns, and I was like, all right, we're gonna turn you heel. Now everybody loves him.
And one of the funny parts about The Rock's rookie year is he had championship success. The Rock was Intercontinental Champion in 1996, in 97. The Rock had the baseline of his career-long feud with Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Triple H during that time. He worked with Mankind. And what gets me is, for all of the dislike that fans had, it wasn't like he was putting out bullshit matches. It wasn't like he was going out there doing 6 or 7 things. He was going out there and putting on great performances. But the character, and I'll say it in this aspect, it's kind of hard to get behind a babyface like that when Stone Cold Steve Austin is the babyface that everyone wants. And Stone Cold is the guy going out there drinking beer, giving middle fingers, and just beating up everyone and anything that moves. That was the essence of the late 90s. Comparable, because we're talking about, you can't talk about The Rock's transition from that to being The Rock with the Nation in 97, 98. Chris Jericho felt the same thing in WCW. He came in being the 80s, smiling, like, I'm going to give it everything I've got. People were like, get out of here. And it took like 2 years for them to finally say, okay, we're going to let you be a heel. The Rock, though, I think the problem with that first year was he was overhyped, and fans were tired of getting a bill of goods for something that was going to last a year tops. Like they'd seen it with guys like Ultimate Warrior, no offense to Ultimate Warrior. They'd seen it with some of these other superstars where you guys are going to hype them and they're not going to last. And it's kind of hard to argue that when The Rock came out at Survivor Series with arguably the worst ring gear in the history of debut ring gear. I mean,
I'd rock it.
You would rock it. There's a difference, though. He rocked it, and everyone was like, "You're gonna let him go out like that?" Okay.
But you know what's funny though is when he came out with that, Rock has a very dominant smile. Yeah. So when he came out in that and he smiled, it completely overshadowed everything on that he had on. Yeah. So it was horrible. You know what I'm saying? So he's like,
yeah,
and
like
his hair is like, dude, like you look like a clown now.
Yeah. And the interesting thing with that first year is November is that first year you had the likes of Bret Hart, you had the likes of Shawn Michaels, you had the likes of Triple H, The Undertaker, Mankind. And then it wasn't until when he, as like Cyclone said, harnessed those Rocky Die chants and was like, okay, fine, this is what I'm going to do, and turned heel with the Nation, and then had that year-long feud between the Nation and DX. And on the DX side, you had Triple H, you had the Road Dogg, you had Billy Gunn, you had X-Pac, you had China. And then on the flip side, in the Nation, you have The Rock as the future. You have a veteran guy in Kama. You have a veteran guy in D'Lo Brown who's been around, and then you had another younger up and comer, Mark Henry, who had just been signed coming out of the Olympics and everything. And then to add to that veteran, to that veteran presence, Owen Hart eventually joined.
Yep.
And honestly,
to add to that,
The Rock has
all
said
of those went through transitions.
Yeah. The Rock has said Owen Hart was a big support system for him early on in his career, especially during that time with the Nation DX feud. And that's what led him to become the star that he was going into 1998.
Well, because Owen was always at heart a trainer. You know what I'm saying? Every single time he spoke to somebody, talked to somebody, even in the ring, like he knew his stuff. Out of every Hart family member, he knew his stuff, man. You know what I'm saying? He knew how a match should go. He knows he knew how something should be. He knew how a move should go. You know, so he knew how to talk to people. Like that's why if he was here today, you know, God rest his soul, if he was here today, man, Owen would be amazing.
Yeah,
it's also one of those things that during that year, because the 97-98 year was a huge transitional period for The Rock, he, as a character, helped get over Stone Cold Steve Austin, because had Stone Cold not broken his neck, his Intercontinental Championship run probably would have gone a lot longer. But it was the passing off of that title to Dwayne Johnson that pissed fans off. Like, why is he getting the Intercontinental title? Why? Because there was the great bridge scene. There was The Rock getting the pager 316 notifications. And then, like you said, going in and feuding with Degeneration X. Sexual Chocolate Mark Henry came out of that. The Godfather came out of that. The head whipping D'Lo Brown came out of that. And DX really established themselves after WrestleMania in 1998. They went in as heels. They came out of it as heels, and then they turned face, because it's kind of hard to hate a group that's going after the competition on their own show. So, it was
white after black, but we're not going there, though, right?
We're not going to talk about what the Croc was. We're not going to talk about what the Croc was baking, because the brother was baking.
We're not going to go that far, are we? No, I didn't think so.
No,
that's been edited off of the network. But
and as we get into 98, of course, 98, you have the DX face turn because of their evasion to WCW and all that. But then what really transcended The Rock into a bigger heel was the tournament that was held at Survivor Series, the Deadly Game tournament, for the vacant WWF Championship at the time, where it, all intents and purposes, it looked like Mankind was going to be the selected guy for Vince McMahon. And then WWF, which they love to do sometimes, they hit you with that big swerve, and it was actually The Rock joining up with McMahon and in the double turn and becoming the corporate champion. And then that whole war with Mankind in late 98, early 99 solidified him even more because of the experience and knowledge that Mick Foley had.
it would be hard pressed for me as a wrestling fan to not say, as great as Triple H's feud with The Rock was, as great as Stone Cold's feud with The Rock was, Mankind, Mick Foley was perhaps The Rock's greatest feud, because Mick gave so much of himself and gave so much to the fans that when he did not win at Survivor Series, as a fan of Mick Foley, there was almost this thought like, we're never going to see a Mick Foley, nice Cyclone. We're never going to see a Mick Foley title run. But it was Mick Foley's win against The Rock on Raw in January of '99 that helped push WWF ahead of WCW in the war. But you have to go to, and Cyclone, I want your thoughts on this, probably one of the most unnecessarily violent matches in pay-per-view history, with the I Quit match at the Royal Rumble '99, because as a fan, I can remember sitting there on my buddy's couch. We'd all get together for pay-per-views and throw $5 down because it was $30 at the time. Mm-hmm. And I watched that pay-per-view and I kept saying out loud, for Christ's sake, just fucking call this match. Like,
yeah, there was a total of 11 chair shots, which was 6 more than the scripted 5 for the match. Yep.
Yeah. But the thing is that Mick Foley does it for the craft. Rock literally got into he blacked out, which I know a lot of wrestlers do, because they get caught up in the moment and they black out. Like Jeremiah Bradley, also or known as now Roscoe Black, completely blacked out on me one match and literally almost snapped my ankle in half. And I'm like, whoa, buddy. So it happens. And I mean, yes, Mankind could have somehow, said, hey, guy, take it home, wrap it up. But, the fans are feeling it. He knew this. He continued to go with it. He loved it, So, yeah, I mean, Rock's a jerk for that. I blame The Rock.
Yeah,
for The Rock.
And then they threw even more. They threw even more violence with the empty arena match during Sunday Night Heat, mm-hmm. which was 20 minutes of brawling. It was in a complete empty arena, and then that allowed Mankind to use a forklift of all things to win the championship.
That was also when The Rock started getting funny, because The Rock would, on commentary and in the middle of that match, he stopped, picked up the phone and said, I'm sorry, Mankind can't talk to you right now. He's eating The Rock's foot, and he kicks him.
Yeah.
And I sat there, I sat there, was like, I fucking hate The Rock. I still hate him, though.
I still hate him.
And then what's funny is The Rock then transpired into even a bigger star, because that's what led to the beginning of the run of WrestleManias for him in Austin.
I'm sorry. Hold on, guys. My wife just stole my gummy bears out of my work bag, and I don't appreciate that. So
I feel for you. No one should ever steal the gummies, ever. How dare she? How dare you, man?
How she's gonna puke.
He needs to not be eating gummy bears.
Oh, shit. Jones's wife just threw shade at him on the podcast. I'm sorry, Cyclone.
Shut up.
Okay. Shut up. So let's talk about that WrestleMania match. Let's talk about WrestleMania 14 for a second.
Because
was it 15?
It was 15.
15, thank you.
14,
even I'm wrong
14,
on occasion.
14 was Austin Michaels.
Austin, yep. Let's talk about WrestleMania 14 leading into 15, because at WrestleMania 13, Rocky Maivia, along with his dad, faced the Sultan and the Iron Sheik, essentially. said The Rock was unable to make it due to injury at WrestleMania 14.
Yep.
At WrestleMania 15, The Rock is going up against arguably the biggest superstar in pro wrestling at that time, Stone Cold Steve Austin. And it was pretty much when you knew the war was over, you were just waiting for it to get called. And for me, that was when you kind of had the glimpses that The Rock was going to eclipse Stone Cold Steve Austin as a face, but he was still the number one heel in pro wrestling, even though you kind of knew he was heading in that direction. You loved to hate him so much that it was just starting to transition into love. And this is probably about the time frame when young Cyclone Jones said, I can do this. I can do this.
Yeah, because shortly after that, of course, he lost the rematch to Austin at the following pay-per-view Backlash in your house, and then the following night on Raw was fired from the corporation, and that's what led to the face turn, and then him feuding with the corporate ministry, and of course Triple H, like for the remainder of 98 or majority of 98, and then of course going into SummerSlam, and then shortly after SummerSlam, The Rock joining a tag team with none other than Mick Foley and the Rock and Sock Connection, leading to the all-time most rated television segment in pro wrestling history. This is your life.
This is your life.
It wasn't a match. That is the most watched segment in wrestling history. It was two comedians going out there in a buddy cut. I got to ask you, as a wrestling fan, when you think of The Rock's career, is this the first thing that pops up, or should it be the first thing that pops up to fans?
If you are a true Rock fan, then yes, this should be one of the first things that pop up. Like that Rock and Sock Connect, that whole segment was amazing, and it wasn't boring. And that's one of the key things is when you have a long segment like that, you lose fans if you don't know what the hell you're doing.
Yeah.
Those two veterans knew exactly what they were doing, and the whole entire segment was entertaining from start to finish.
The segment earned a 8.4 on the Nielsen rating, one of the highest ratings ever for a Raw segment.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny part about that is Mankind has talked about it. The segment started off with a lower number. And as the segment kept going, the number kept raising, which back in that time would have been a friend calling a friend on their house phone.
I was about to say that, yeah.
Saying, are you watching this? No, you should be. And then that person nowadays would be texting.
Yep.
And this should put things in a fan perspective. The next segment on any wrestling program that came close to that was Edge and Lita's live sexcapades following Edge's victory in Albany, New York for the cashing in of the Money in the Bank in January of 2006. It took 7 years nearly for a wrestling segment, and it took sex. It took sex to come close. And it didn't even come close. The Rock is still bigger than Edge in many ways. Bling. Bling, bing, bong. But it's so weird to think that in a 2-year span, 3 years by this point, you went from a character that no one gave a shit about to a character that everyone hated to a character that could go out there with Mick Foley and essentially do an 18-minute bit, which led to everyone finding out when The Rock's birthday really was.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yep.
All it was a mishap birthday joke. That was the punchline. And it is brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's interesting because, of course, we talk about the highest rated segment, and of course, This Is Your Life. Like, there's been tons of other segments like in pro wrestling history that have been highly rated, and like the first Austin McMahon stunner, of course, the one you mentioned, the live sex with Edge and Lita. I believe Matt Hardy showing back up and attacking Edge was a highly rated segment just because of people texting and everything. But this is the thing is that segment will always be the top one because of the fact that it went on for nearly 20 minutes. And as Mick Foley stated, like you said, it started low. Like it was, and Nielsen even said, hey, this is what happened. Like this segment, like for the first 5 minutes of this segment, it was sitting between like a 5.5 and 6.2. And then as it went on, it got higher with it peaking at like 9.1. But by the time it was over, it had averaged out around 8.4. And they're like, okay, they took the entire variety and averaged out like minute by minute,
right,
of like the numbers and everything, and did the average, and that's what led to the 8.4 on the Nielsen rating.
And it was also around this time that we started seeing The Rock go into Hollywood and go into the entertainment business, and he'd stick his toe in. He did an episode of Star Trek Voyager where he was an alien combatant. And in the lead up to WrestleMania 2000, he hosted Saturday Night Live. The last pro wrestler to host Saturday Night Live was Hulk Hogan in the Rock and Wrestling Connection leading up to WrestleMania 1.
Yeah.
And
the mainstream run that he had before doing movies, he appeared in Wyclef Jean's 2000 single "It Doesn't Matter." He also recorded Pie with Slick Rick for WWF The Music Volume 5. He appeared in the 70s show as his father, Rocky Johnson. Was Star Trek Voyager, then SNL. He was listed in 1999. He was listed number 5 on Entertainment's weekly top 12 entertainers of the year. In 2000, he was number 6 in the top 10 for Access Hollywood. And then he was listed in Entertainment's weekly 101 most influential people in both 2000 and 2001. So like he like from 99 to 2001 is when he started gaining the steam, like doing TV and being on these entertainment lists. And then that came the big break with the motion picture debut as the Scorpion King in The Mummy Returns in 2001.
But the thing is that this was the Rock's main goal. Pro wrestling was not his goal. Like, have either of you read his book?
Yeah, I read his book like a long time ago.
Right, but
I remember he said he saw Raiders of the Lost Ark as a kid and watched G.I. Joe the cartoon, and he said he wanted to be Indiana Jones and he wanted to be Snake Eyes from G.I. Joe.
Yep.
Right.
Those were his goals.
In his book, though, he says, like, I want to be the next James Dean. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to be cool, like James Dean. Like, you know, James Dean, you see him, he's cool. You see him jacket and cigarette and chill. Like who wouldn't want to be that cool dude? Like in his book, The Rock he said, I want to be that. And that was his main goal. And as you see, he's doing it now. Every single time you see The Rock, women be like, oh my gosh, it's The Rock. He's so bald-headed and muscular and he's so cute. Oh my goodness. And guys are like, yo.
It was something I mentioned to Dan before we started recording. I was like, the reaction that people had when the Fortnite trailer dropped yesterday, and he takes off the helmet, and it's The Rock as a original Fortnite character known as the Foundation. It is Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, and people were just like losing their shit about it.
I was mad about that because my screen blacked out during that time frame, and I had to go in the back with my son to watch it, and I missed it. So, well, go ahead, Fury. What was your thought on that?
But it's the thing.
Hold on, Fury. What was your thought on that?
All right, so here's my thoughts on The Rock. First off, Cyclone, does your wife like talk about The Rock like that? Because that was oddly specific, the way that you were nailing that whole like rock talk down.
Oh no. Listen. See, my wife is my best friend. Let me just make that 100% clear. She is my best friend. So I know her like the back of my hand. So if she saw The Rock on TV, then yeah, she'll be like, yo, what's up?
The funny part about this is at this point in time in the world, like 2021 going into 2022, as we record this podcast, I am wearing a Rock hoodie and a Rock hat from Under Armour, which is the top selling sports wear underneath Air Jordan. So legitimately, Air Jordan, Dwayne Johnson. Dwayne Johnson's gear has made more money than Kobe and LeBron James's gear. So just put that into perspective.
Yeah.
The Rock's new tequila has just come out. The Rock's energy drink is the top selling energy drink in the country. His movie on Netflix, Red Notice, has just become the most watched movie debut in Netflix history.
Which is awesome. Have you seen it?
I have seen it. It is hilarious as shit.
Amazing.
The Rock is about to change superhero movies next year with Black Adam. And
amazing.
His production company, $7 Productions, based on the fact that The Rock had $7 in his pocket when he left the Canadian Football League and came home in 1996 to his parents' house in Tampa. This all is, and his next season of his show Young Rock, which revolves around his first year in WWF, all is happening at this current point in time. And the thing you have to remember is he took a gamble when he started to transition away from professional wrestling in 2001 to go film the first solo movie he was in, The Scorpion King, which at that time, for a first-time actor starring role, was the most money a first-time actor had gotten for his debut in a film, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was $10 million. Pat G, you can check that for how much he got paid for his debut starring role headlining in a movie. And a lot of fans saw the writing on the wall in 2001, and going into 2002, when he started doing these spots in WWE, leading up to the coronation of Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam 2002, becoming the next big thing.
Yeah. When he debuted in The Mummy Returns, the movie broke a 2-year record for highest grossing single day in film history by earning $28,594,667.
And how much did The Rock get paid for Scorpion King? Because I know at that time it was the highest payday for a first-time starring role, because he was only on screen for maybe 4 minutes of The Mummy Returns before he became digital at the end of the movie and became a Scorpion.
The film provided Johnson with his first starring role, plus a $5.5 million salary that left the actor feeling humbled. Fans too resonated with Johnson's take on the action-packed film, and the appearance provided a platform for future work.
All right, so $5 million for a first-time role.
Yeah, $5.5 million.
$5.5 million. So looking at that, and then going into 2003, I think, in my guesstimation, 2003 was the last real year you saw The Rock as a pro wrestler and not just moonlighting in pro wrestling, because he returned at the beginning of the year, faced Hulk Hogan at No Way Out, leading to him facing Austin and finally beating Austin at WrestleMania 19 in their trilogy, and then ushering in Goldberg's run, 1 year run in WWE before going back to Hollywood, coming back the following year for WrestleMania 20, and then we didn't see The Rock again for 7 years.
Yeah, his final feuds and first retirement was 2003 to 2004. That's when he had the matches with Hogan. He had the final match with Austin.
Yep.
And then, of course, WrestleMania 20 with the handicap match in 2004 with Mick Foley versus Evolution. And then after that, he didn't return to WWE outside of a handful of appearances in taped format until 2011 when he started his feud with Cena, and then
Valentine's Day. Yep.
Yeah, and then he's had sporadic appearances over the last 5 years. From 2014 to 2019. Of course, he made the appearance at Impact to induct Ken Shamrock, and then he's outside of sporadic appearances here and there. He's not been involved in wrestling in any real capacity outside of like a handful of appearances in the last 2 years, just because of his film schedule.
So let me ask you both a question, and I'm going to start with Cyclone Jones first. It's Valentine's Day, 2011. We are in a weird time in professional wrestling. The PG era has kind of run its course.
Mm-hmm.
Fans are clamoring for something. We want something. John Cena at that point had been on top for damn near 10 years, heading towards that mark. We had The Miz was champion at the time. Edge's career, we didn't know it, but his full-time career was coming to an end. And at that point, guys like Triple H and Undertaker were only doing matches once in a while. And they announced that there's going to be a special guest for this year's WrestleMania in Atlanta.
Yep.
The final segment of Monday Night Raw that night on Valentine's Day was leading up to it, a pair of women's legs leaving a limousine. Jerry Lawler, of course, gets all horn-dogged up because, he's Jerry Lawler.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Roberts leads us into the segment by saying, the host of this year's WrestleMania is electricity on the screen, a pulse, the arena goes dark, and then you hear it. I want to ask Cyclone first. When you heard it, did you feel it?
No. I was it. I became it. I didn't feel it. I was a part of it. Like, there was no way in the world you couldn't be. You know what I'm saying? Like I always say, whenever The Rock speaks, every single person listens. Everybody's ears perk up because he's just that awesome with every single word, with his word syllables and everything. So he's awesome. As soon as his music hits and he's getting ready to come out, dude, it's electrifying, lack of better words. It really is, dude. And you get involved in it. You can't help it.
Yeah. It's the thing that he has become so transcendent across all forms of media. He's the 4th most followed person on Instagram as of November of 2021. Like, he's become, and we said it a couple of weeks ago, that he's become even more transcendent from wrestling to Hollywood than Hogan. Like, you still hear the name Hulk Hogan. Okay, if you're not a wrestling fan, or the name, but
I'm just talking about his movies. That's what I'm talking about. Suburban Commando.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you mention The Rock or Dwayne Johnson, everyone knows. Whether you're a wrestling fan, whether you're not a wrestling fan, You know who he is.
Well, that's the way it goes, because whenever people, tell me or talk to me and it's like, oh, you're a pro wrestler? Like, I don't watch it anymore. I used to watch it back in the days, way before you even knew, Hulk Hogan. And I'm like, dude, I used to watch it before you even born, Yeah. But, people don't understand it, but that's how they relate, to the person at that time, Oh, I used to watch it with Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior. I used to watch these movies. They start talking about that. Now it's that same thing. Oh, you watch wrestling? Oh my gosh, you know The Rock? No, I don't know The Rock. But that's how people relate to it.
Yeah. It's just that it's just he's transcended everything. As we're wrapping up here, I'd like to thank Cyclone Jones for joining us once again, making his return. But we are going to close it out here for the special edition Rock episode celebrating 25 years of The Rock. Until then, be safe, be kind, be healthy. For Dan Fury, I'm Pat G. Cyclone Jones. This is the TTRP. We out.
Cyclone Jones. That's all. Thanks.
The Turnbuckle Talk Radio podcast is brought to you by Gear Network and ShopGear.com. We can be listened to via Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and everywhere else you can get your podcasts. The TTRP introduction was done by Trevor Dugan. The show is hosted by Patrick Ancheski and Daniel Roberts. Post-production of the TTRP is done by Patrick Ancheski and John Cimino. If you'd like to follow us via social media, you can search Turnbuckle Talk Radio Podcast on Facebook. You can follow us at Twitter by using the name Turnbuckle_Talk. Or if you have questions or concerns, you can reach us via email at turnbuckletlkradio@gmail.com. We'd like to thank you for listening to the Turnbuckle Talk Radio Podcast, downloading our episodes, following us on social media, and interacting with us.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network.